Hello, everybody. Welcome to the MiniDebConf Live 2, the gaming edition. And we're about to do an introductory video, and after that, some of the team members will say hi.
Hi, and after months of planning, welcome to MiniDebConf Online Gaming Edition. Why a gaming MiniDebConf? Well, we had our first online MiniDebConf in May this year. In part, that was due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and also in part because we want to improve our online collaboration tools. We also want to make DebConf better for remote participants, and what better way to do that than to make DebConf remote for just everyone. We took a very bare bones approach to it, but it turned out to be fun and productive, and we already decided that we want to do more online mini-debconfs at some point in the future. Then it was decided that DebConf 20 was going to be an entirely online event, so we quickly worked on improving the stack. Stefano even quickly wrote a new front end for Vocto called Vogel. This is what we use to mix our live stream with. Here's a screenshot of that. Our video team members will be somewhat familiar with that already. So MiniDebConf Online was a general Debian weekend, just like all the MiniDebConfs that happened in the past. But there were also a few ideas for themed events. I hope that all of these will, and more, will work out at some point. But I went ahead and proposed a gaming event because there's so much happening in this space right now, and I think the timing is right for us to speak about it too. Although that still doesn't answer the question, why is games a good topic to cover? Well, things change fast, and they certainly have in recent years. If you think back to about 2005 or so, the gaming world on a PC was heavily Windows dominated. macOS got steam later in the decade and started to look like it could take on Windows and probably even be a close to second choice for gamers. Since then, things have regressed somewhat in the proprietary operating system world when it comes to games, and in the free software world, some significant strides have been made forward. So I think the playing field is slowly starting to level out, and I think there's potential for Debian to really shine as a gaming platform over the next decade or so. So let's talk about Macs a little. Even though macOS looked like a promising platform for gamers a decade ago, that quickly eroded again since. A significant change was when they dropped support for 32-bit apps. This is quite a big hit for some game libraries since many games in the last decade before that were 32-bit only. It also means that you can't even run 32-bit Wine on those macOS systems anymore. Then Apple also decided to phase out OpenGL in favor of their Metal framework. Game developers did not like this because this meant a lot of extra work would have to go in for them for a relatively small segment of users, so many games simply didn't get ported over anymore. A huge problem in Macs is also some seemingly planned obsolescence in terms of hardware operating system support. I admit to owning a Mac Mini, and a few years ago I wanted to upgrade it, and it said that the latest OS X that I could run on there was only up to 10.5. Even though it's a perfectly capable 64-bit machine with enough RAM to run the latest system, they wouldn't allow it to upgrade. And you could install it with some hacks, but I just never had the time to do so. This quickly turns into a problem because, like in this headline that I pasted in that image, once your operating system gets too old because your hardware is too old, you can't actually run the latest versions of your game library or stores anymore, and you lose a lot of your games that you're able to install because of that. Then Valve also dropped macOS support for SteamVR, Steam's virtual reality platform, with the intent to purely focus on Windows and Linux. And I haven't used it myself, but from what I've seen on the internet, it seems to work quite well on Linux systems. Then they also announced earlier this month that they're moving entirely to their new ARM-based M1 chip. This isn't in itself a bad thing at all, but it's not great for compatibility. Current x86 code that's compiled in Xcode will be able to compile to a new binary that can run on both platforms, but the vast majority of x86 games will only be able to run under a very slow emulation mode, which might be fine for very old x86 games, but for none of the recent ones. As a side note, this also seems to be quite an issue for Docker users on these machines. I could go on and on about Mac problems with gaming, but we haven't even talked about all the problems with the App Store yet, or issues with sideloading apps, or how, at least according to early reviews, the bootloader is locked on the new ARM-based Macs, so you won't even be able to dual boot Linux on it. But this conference isn't about bashing Mac. This section is merely to show that Apple computers just aren't as good a choice for gamers anymore as they used to be. And I could delve into Windows problems too, but we just don't have the time right now. Let's instead talk about the Penguin stuff. Well, this year is just weird. While Linux market share is steadily climbing, in May month it was reported to double. That's at a much faster rate than the previous trajectory. Then in July it had a very slight dip again. There were lots of speculation on what could cause this and whether the new stats might just be a correction on the previous numbers, but it seems like there was a very strong correlation in upswing of Linux use when people stayed at home for lockdowns, and then it goes down a little again when they go back to work. It looks like staying at home was an opportunity for many people to try out Linux, and more Linux home users create more demand for Linux games. And then there's stuff that happened in the Linux world over the last decade that were quite big. Like we had Vulkan come along, and Proton, and a bunch of technologies that has Ds and X's and V's and K's in them. Many proprietary game engines now support Linux. In a top dozen or so of them, they all support Linux. A huge list of newer free game engines were released. Godot is one example that we'll cover a bit this weekend. Many older proprietary engines are implemented as free software. And I think that's great because it's also a way to preserve older games. And I would also encourage game authors to release as much of their content as they can as free licenses, because it's a great way to preserve games for future generations as well. Old creator tools that's been around for a long time, like Blender and GIMP, just keeps getting better by huge leaps, and new ones like Pixelorama and Krita also have emerged. I mean, Pixelorama is covered during MiniDebConf this weekend, and even though Krita has been around a while, it's kind of gained like a critical mass of popularity recently. There's also many emulators for nearly any console or system you could think of in Debian, and technologies like QEMU KVM has also come a really long way, and some useful features for gamers like PCI pass-through, so that you can pass through your GPU to a virtual machine if needed. That's all really great stuff. But we also haven't figured everything out yet. We know that Debian isn't perfect. This is an unexhaustive list. We know that stable releases aren't great for the latest hardware. Just yesterday, a colleague of mine was installing Debian on a new Ryzen machine, and it just wasn't possible with stable. Even though there's a backports repository, which generally works great, we need to do better with hardware enablement on stable releases. There's still lots of game-related software and games not packaged for Debian, so we need more contributors. But getting started with contributing to Debian in itself can be tough, and we are working on making that better as well. So consider getting involved. There's probably lots of areas where you can help with. So in a nutshell, we've really come a long way, but I think it's just early days and that the best is yet to come. So join us and be part of this change. We also have a code of conduct during this conference. You can get all the details on this URL. Take a screenshot of that now if you can, just to have the information handy. But in a nutshell, be nice to others and contact community@debian.org if you run into any problems. Also important, don't stress if English isn't your first language or if you're not that fluent in it. That's true for many of us in the project and in this conference. And don't stress if you're not even a Debian user. Some of our speakers are Arch Linux users or Fedora Linux users, and one even works for Microsoft, so it's all perfectly fine. So, if we have a minute or two left, we'll quickly introduce our team and then we'll move over to the talks. And we're on.
Yep, and we're back. Now the team members will introduce themselves, starting with Kyle.
Cool. Hi, I'm Kyle, Putter Trapper on IRC. Video team mainly. And I hope you enjoy the conference.
I'm Jonathan, High Voltage on IRC and general organizer as well.
Hi, I'm Urbeck. I'm the scary person from the Loopy Loop.
Hi, I'm Phil. I'm an itinerant video director, so I'll occasionally be video directing.
I'm Nattie, and if you're a speaker, you've probably interacted with me. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Wouter. I'm a video team member, and I'm just hanging around.
And
My name is Abraham, and I contribute to Debian and happy to help as well.
Cool. And we have a bunch of contributors to this who's also still sleeping. They're in Canada and US and Brazil. So thank you to all of them. Maybe we can have them with the closing and we'll introduce them then.
And the next thing is, And the next thing is the opening talk, which is /play.it. And please join us there. Thank you very much.